a not-so-hot take. Our political system is broken. Hot take. Our political system is so broken that someone like Howard Schultz thinks he's gonna be the guy to fix it. Dyze in your house. Exclusively on East Coast Radio. Mile journey begins with one step. Progressives took that step on November 6th. The journey's not over, but we took a step in the right direction.
If you don't know what Staten Island is, it's like New York's abortion that lived.
Did you see New York 11 elected a Democrat? New York 11 is Staten Island, the most Trumpian place in New York City. Elected a Democrat. Don't try to tell me it wasn't a wave. Robert Mueller isn't the only person investigating Trump now. We have the House Intel Committee is now chaired by Adam Schiff, and they have subpoena power. And he will use it. And he will get to the bottom of this, like he's been trying to do for the last 2 years, and Devin Nunes has been stymieing him. Devin Nunes is no longer the chairman. The midnight runs to the White House are over. I made a promise to the listeners of East Coast Radio that if the Democrats did not mess up November, that if November 6th went our way, that we would have a little fun here on East Coast Radio. And if you stay tuned, I promise you this. Along with our fighting fascism and trying to save democracy, we will have a little fun. Because we earned it. Keep it locked to East Coast Radio.
Representing Staten Island.
Remember, we got Dyze in your house at the end of the week. We got the J Parks podcast at the beginning of the week. Every week, East Coast Radio for the least heard voices. Get us on Patreon, patreon.com/JParks, and follow us on Twitter at East Coast Radio. Let's punch fascism in the face. One podcast at a time.
If you don't know what Staten Island is, it's like New York's abortion that lived. Representing Staten Island. Staten Island was no joke.
Hey yo, who's in the house? Dyze in your house. What is the word, peeps? What goes on? It is Friday. It is the 1st of February, and we are back with another action-packed edition of Dyze in your house. Here exclusively on East Coast Radio for the least heard voices. What we do here on East Coast Radio is we fight fascism one podcast at a time. Alexa, what is fascism?
The noun fascism is usually defined as a governmental system led by a dictator having complete power, forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism, regimenting all industry, commerce, etc., and emphasizing an aggressive nationalism and often racism.
An aggressive nationalism and also racism. That's really where those are the two obvious factors of where we're going in this country. But there's a lot of things that resembled Germany pre-Holocaust. Just fascist state is rising in America. And if we don't put a stop to it, then it's going to spread. It's like if you see an ant, you have to kill the ants. Because if they're able to make a colony, they're going to make more ants. And more ants are going to spry. Right now we have about 23% of the country that thinks that this is okay. And we need to make sure that those 23%, or at least the other 77%, at least they come to grips with the fact that elections have consequences, and we're living in them right now, and that's why we need the 2020 blue wave to happen. Hashtag blue wave 2020. So we're here. The reason I have a pod, I always had a podcast. You know, I had a podcast. We're up to episode, it's going to be 259 this weekend. Jay Pork's podcast. And I used to talk about things, you know, consequential things to my life. And then November 2016 happened, and I needed to make a change because I could not be complicit in the downfall of America. I can't watch my country burn and do nothing about it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use the platforms I have. And the platform is the podcast, and the weapon is my voice. So what we did was we made the Jay Pork's podcast into an all-out, you know, resist fest, where we bring you all the corruption, all the lies, all the investigations, all of the findings, all of the criminality that comes out of this rising fascist regime. We document that for you on the Jay Pork's podcast every Sunday. But it was getting so vast that we didn't want to go 3 hours, 4 hours on Sunday. Who's got 4 hours in the day? You know, I mean, who's got 4 hours to listen unless you're traveling for that long? So we decided to break it up a little bit. We got the Friday Dyze in your house. It's the recap of, you know, the week's, usually the big story. You know, and then on Sundays, on the Jay Pork's podcast, Sunday evening, around the time you'd be settling in to watch 60 Minutes or KCDC, screw that. Turn on the Jay Pork's podcast. Or, better yet, listen to it during the commercials and get the truth that I'm spitting. But, and on the Jay Pork's podcast coming up on Sunday, the first one of February 2019, we have a big episode. We're going to talk about latest in the Mueller probe. We had some sneaky tactics, some discovery information was being released to the public. We'll talk about that. Talk about that fentanyl bust at the legal port of entry. We're going to talk about why Mitch McConnell wants to stop people from voting. All of that and more coming up on Sunday. If you just keep it locked to Least Coast Radio for the least heard voices, home of the lone liberal on Staten Island. J, P to the O to the R to the K to the S. This week I want to talk about something. I want to talk about something that is near and dear to me in a couple of ways. Full disclosure, I really enjoy Starbucks coffee. Like, I know that I'm poor and I don't have a job, so I have no business actually paying the amount of money that a coffee at Starbucks costs. And I know I'm getting regular coffee, and most people go in there for mocha frappa lattes. I don't do that. Too many calories. I go in there for regular coffee. I like Starbucks. I like that they have the Splenda out, so I'm able to take a couple of extra packets and put it in my pocket. I like that they let you loiter. As, again, somebody without money and no job, you know, you need a place to loiter, a place that's warm where you can charge your phone. I'm down with Starbs, and I'm not boycotting Starbucks, and I'm not giving the baristas a hard time at Starbucks because Howard Schultz is talking about running for president. I'm just going to use this platform, which is Dyze in your house, exclusively on Least Coast Radio, to talk about why Howard Schultz is not the answer. He's not the... For someone to say our political system is broken and then not be a politician and try to run... No, that's why it's broken, man. And again, I love Starbucks coffee. I can't say it enough. I really like the coffee. I know that makes me a bad person because Howard Schultz is gonna Ralph Nader this. Howard Schultz is from the Bayview Projects in Canarsie, in Brooklyn. I'm from that neighborhood. I didn't live in the projects, but my friends did. I went there. I was there with my friends. I was there as a young kid with my friend Kyle Holmes. I'll never forget this. We watched Super Bowl 30 at Kyle Holmes' house, and I had to leave at halftime because my dad came and picked me up because, you know, it's dark and I was in the projects and my dad thought it was bad. I didn't know. It didn't seem bad at the time. The Bayview Projects. Howard Schultz is from there. All indications are I should like this guy. Makes a good coffee. No. Listen, I have not been following, politics every day of my adult life since my 18th birthday. That has not been the case. I'm not a political science major, but here's what I could tell you. And we've already experimented with it. How about people running for president have to be politicians? How about we're done with the business person running for office who knows nothing about passing bills, legislating, knows nothing about how any of this works. I'm not saying Howard Schultz isn't a good businessman. And I'm not saying that with some time, like, alright, take it back to 2016. Remember after the election? Remember Hillary's ghost cabinet came out? They were talking about, these are the people allegedly. It wasn't like nobody was like, yeah, that's what it's going to be. But there was an article that had the ghost cabinet, likely possibilities of Hillary Clinton's cabinet. Howard Schultz was going to be Secretary of Labor in Hillary Clinton's cabinet. Hillary Clinton never once said she was a centrist. I know she kind of was, but she didn't go around saying, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. Howard Schultz, 2 years ago, would have been working in a Democratic administration if there hadn't been Russian active measures involved. How? For the life of me, do you come out here and say the Democrats are doing this, this, and this? How do you criticize Democrats and not criticize Republicans? And anybody, there are conservatives out there that don't like Trump, but they like the idea of Schultz running because they don't really mind him. They think he's better than Trump if you put them up against each other, and they think he can play spoiler play spoiler and eliminate Trump. That's where you're wrong. And again, I'm not a political science major. I'm a guy that watches life, okay? I'm a guy that's that's been watching things unfold the last 2 years. Read news stories, listen to the intel, listen to journalists, listen to trusted people, not the Maggie Habermans, not the New York Times. I'm talking about journalists who don't have any agendas, who aren't a pipeline to Trump. Former intel people, former members of Congress, future members of Congress, people who weren't members of Congress who are now members of Congress. Members of Congress. I've been watching this unfold. I've been watching this unfold my whole life. One time, there was one instance where a third-party candidate helped a Democrat win the election. That was 1992. That was Bill Clinton. All right? That's 27 years ago. Times have changed. For instance, we allowed a foreign government to interfere with our election. And, Republicans, the majority in the Senate and, is just okay with letting that go by. Oh, we do it to other people. We're America. Okay? There is no, there is no equating it. Oh, well, we've done something similar. What? We fixed an election to take out a dictator one time? We didn't have a country, we didn't fix an election to allow a dictator to take over a country. We never did that. Now Howard Schultz is not going to Ross Perot this. He's going to Ralph Nader this. He'll Jill Stein it, Gary Johnson it, Bernie Sanders it, whatever you want to call it. Howard Schultz running for president does not equal a Democratic president. I've done the math. There's no math that helps. All Howard Schultz would do is grab fringe Republicans, which are actually moderates. The moderate conservative Republicans, that's the fringe now. The majority of it is extreme. And if you want to say, oh, Jay, that's not the case. All right, well, actions speak louder than polls and words, And I'll point to 2016, again, as actions speak louder than polls. So don't tell me that a majority of Republicans aren't radical now. They're radical. Okay? They're okay with Russia interfering with our election. And after we've determined that fact, Instead of doing everything we can to make sure this doesn't happen again, instead of Howard Schultz maybe, you know, closing his mouth for a couple of years, donate some money, get a Democrat in office, and then do what you want to do when there's not a fascist regime rising in our country. Even Bloomberg thought it was stupid for Schultz to exploratory committee this. You see the protester yelling at Schultz, you gonna help elect Trump? No shit! And then, you know, that was the first day. Howard Schultz announced it. I went nuts. And then found out he's from the Bayview Project. He's from my hood. My old hood. I grew up on East 94th Street between J and K. I could walk to those Bayview projects. I did it as a teenager, I was 11 or 12. I wasn't a teenager yet. A preteen. I did it. After Super Bowl 30. It was Pittsburgh. It might have been 29. It was Pittsburgh and the Dallas Cowboys. I watched that with my friend Kyle Holmes. I think I was in 1st or 2nd grade. Hanging out in the Bayview projects in Canarsie. We went sledding. Actually, I've been there multiple times at that age. And then, as a preteen, I had friends who were like 13, and I would roll with them. And, you know, sometimes we'd end up hanging out in the projects, playing basketball, whatever the case may be. Howard Schultz is from there. But let's talk about why Howard Schultz really isn't a Democrat, even though he grew up in the Bayview projects. Housing projects, more or less, a majority of the money for projects comes from taxing the wealthy, okay? The Bayview projects were built in large part by wealthy people, really wealthy people, paying a 91% tax. Part of that tax went to pay for projects, affordable housing. But Howard Schultz chooses not to be a Democrat this year because he doesn't want to pay 70% tax so people don't get health care. You know, he wants to make sure that his tax dollars don't go to pay for any sick people's health care. Even though he wouldn't have had a place to live as a child if rich people weren't paying a 91% tax rate. The tax rate, look at the tax rate on wealthy people over the years. It has always been in the 90s, the 80s. Even with Reagan, it was over 50. That's how this goes. Wealthy people have to get taxed at a higher rate. Now, I understand, like my dad was telling me, he's an old school Democrat, you know? An old school Democrat. He's just an adult. You know, and he's telling me, you know, with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Elizabeth Warren, when you say things like, we gotta tax the wealthy, he says, you can't say that. He's like, I agree. He's like, I agree with the notion of doing it. He's like, but you can't come out and say that. No. Again, this is not 1992. I beg to differ with that hypothesis. Things are different. We live in the social media transparent society. We need to be out in the open about everything. You can't run a platform and not say you're going to tax the wealthy, get into office, and tax the wealthy. That's not honest. That makes people not trust politicians. Okay? So that's why Elizabeth Warren, who's got an ultra wealth tax, which is very smart, like the way she has it where she wants to tax belongings, like a painting, a boat. That's smart. Because these people just, you know, they claim to not have money. They'll tie it up in a foreign account or something, the extra cash. No. We'll tax the things you have. Unless you won them in a contest. You know? That's wealth. That's assets. If you were a drug dealer and they accused you of, and then the cops came and accused you, they would seize your assets, would they not? So if you're a law-abiding citizen helping America get by, shouldn't you pay your fair share of tax? And listen, We're talking about people that make more than $10 million a year. We're not talking about you or anybody listening to this podcast. But for people like, for Howard Schultz to call a wealth tax un-American, when a wealth tax is part of the reason why his family had a place to live when he was a child, why he has that little nugget of information he can share. Oh, you know, I know I'm a rich white guy now, but I'm from the Bayview Projects, okay? I mean, first of all, is he from there in 1992? No, he's not. You know? I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. It's Brooklyn. Canarsie was a different place in the 70s or whenever Howard Schultz grew up, okay? So it looks really bad for people like Bloomberg and Schultz to call a wealth tax un-American. Well, let me not lump that in. Bloomberg did not call it un-American. Howard Schultz called it un-American, which is why he doesn't have the chops to be a politician. You save the un-American stuff. You save that talk for when somebody actually does something that's un-American. That's a back pocket issue. That's when somebody's campaign gets together with a hostile foreign nation to influence the outcome of an election by hacking into people's computers and stealing their emails. That's un-American. A wealth tax? That's just smart business. That's how we're going to pay for healthcare for everybody. And before I get up on out of here, let me just say this. My tooth is really hurting, so like I'm trying not to scream. When I scream, it hurts. But let me just say this. The people, the liberals, man, us liberals, we are the reason. We are part of the reason why we never have nice things. Kamala Harris has momentum. She's got fans. She's got a big following. She's big on social media. Millennials love her. She's been an all-star in the Senate for the last 2 years. Voted against Trump with everything. Pressed Brett Kavanaugh. Asked Bill Barr the weed question. How are we sitting here on the internet trashing Kamala Harris? I saw an op-ed. Black culture won't save Kamala Harris. What? Oh, because she was a prosecutor? And maybe you don't like her record as a prosecutor? Here's the thing about politics. It's evolution, man. She would not prosecute those cases the same today as she would at that time in her life. People change. Kirsten Gillibrand was for guns. Kirsten Gillibrand 6 months ago, or not 6 months ago, in November, said that she was going to serve her full term in the Senate. She's running for president. So don't tell me that people's thoughts can't evolve. Now, you have every right as like a journalist or a constituent. If you're somebody that wants to press Kamala Harris on her record, I look forward to seeing that because I want her to explain it. That's good. Debate is good. But to automatically dismiss her because she's from California and she happens to, you know, you don't like the list of donors she has. Are the Koch brothers on that list? The Koch brothers? Are the Mercers on that list? You know what I'm saying? Is she a Bernie Sanders Democrat? No. Because Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. Hashtag Bernie is not a Democrat. Sick of this. Listen, we're going to have primaries. We're going to have debates. People are going to learn one way or another whether these are people that they want to vote for. But for liberals to sit there and do the Republicans' job for them is the reason why Trump is going to get reelected. And that's the most dangerous thing that could happen with this election cycle. People say that the problem with 2018 was selected, not elected, you know, because they feel like Hillary Clinton was the picked person. Maybe, and I'm not saying that that's something we should do now, but, you know, a united front would be better. Did you see the House of Representatives shut down the wall with a united front? When you're together, you can get things done. And I think liberals, Democrats, online, on TV. We just need to, listen. We have a thing. If there's something about Kamala Harris's record that you don't like, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask her the question, and you're gonna listen for the answer. You're not gonna prejudge anything, okay? Because the people that say that the political system is broken also want to vote for business people and independents and Bernie Sanders, and you can't. That's not how this works. If you want to fix it, elect somebody who speaks to you. Look at the Democratic field and pick the person who you think is going to best serve your interests. And right now, even though Booker threw his name in the rankings, Kamala Harris still number 1 on my power rankings, second to Elizabeth Warren. Second is Elizabeth Warren. We'll get into more of the 2020 Dem primary, all that stuff, coming up on Sunday on a brand new episode of the Jay Porks Podcast. I'm Jay Porks. This has been Dyze in Your House, exclusively on Least Coast Radio.